Hello. So today I'm going to be talking about platform cost trends for 2025 and what marketers need to know about it. First, just a little bit about me. I'm Jack. I'm the group director here at Tag Digital for paid media. Looking forward to taking you through the things that I've been putting out from the big bit of data that we have. I'd be amiss to not mention we've got a benchmarking report that you can download that sort of gives you trends across different industries and all these sort of things. And you can sort of dive into this a little bit deeper for yourself. So today I'm going to be talking a lot about CPC and CPM, and I want to kind of put some meat on why you should care about those two metrics, because often we're talking about CPA as our core KPI. Now, CPC and CPM are essentially the cost in which it costs to get a click or to get 1,000 impressions. The reason why we care about that is it's ultimately how the auctions are driven. If it costs more to get more clicks, so the CPC is higher, you'll get either less clicks for your budget and therefore less conversions, which therefore impacts your CPA. And it's the same for CPM. If we're seeing a higher CPM, you'll get less impressions for your budget and therefore less clicks and therefore less conversions. So looking at that trend is super important. It's something that we're looking at to sort of understand how the market's happening, and you'll see it fluctuate through the year, and I'll come on to show you some data about that as well. But first, I'm going to kick off with this stat here. 2024 was the most expensive year to advertise in Google in the last 5 years, which is a pretty amazing stat, I thought. And I'll just preload this next slide. Was that it's not the marketing team aren't the biggest fan of it because it's not the prettiest thing, but I think it's probably the best way to illustrate this data. So it's a big table. It's kind of ugly, but bear with me and I'll explain it. I've taken the CPC trend month over month for the last 5 years and then just put some data validation on there to show you where it gets more expensive and where it gets less expensive. Through 2020, you can obviously see it's a lot cheaper. We didn't have a lot else to do but be on our phones. So you can see CPC cost dip. And then 2021, everything opened back up, more people advertising, and we saw costs spike. And then finally, 2022, we're seeing financial factors get involved and we're seeing costs drop again. And then as we move into 2023 and 24 and beyond, and where we start to get into the sharper end of things where it's more relevant, you'll see costs sharply start to rise. And one really interesting thing I wanted to pull out here was if you look in 2024 where I've circled there, have a think and guess what might have happened there. It's actually the AI overview was released. So for anyone that doesn't know or hasn't somehow Googled something in the last sort of 6-7 months, it's where Google uses Gemini, so an AI large language model, to summarize results and give you a response. There's still some debate over how accurate these can be. So for event organizers, it's making sure your schema is correct to make sure that it's showing things like the correct date and all those sort of elements. But it does it for any number of topics now on a Google search. So it started to roll out there. And the other core point here is that it sits at the top of the results page. It now takes up that coveted top spot. That's what you're paying for. That's what you're paying your SEO team to get you to. It's now by default taken up by an AI summary. So automatically everything gets pumped down. It's also seen a rise in CPC as a result. So you can sort of directly correlate it there, which is really, really interesting actually. And the next thing is something I'll take you through is Performance Max, and here I refer to it as PMax, and how that affects things. So I looked at this same data for brands that we work with that we'd recommended, and they chose to include PMax in their campaigns, and they saw a 30% lower CPC. There's nuances to Performance Max because it requires video, so you can advertise on YouTube, and it goes across a wider network, and it essentially uses algorithmic-based targeting to put you in front of the right people at the right time to drive conversions. It's a really powerful format for driving lots of conversions. But I know that there'll be some people thinking right now they've got reservations around it, which are totally fair and totally founded, that sometimes it can increase the instances of, say, lower quality registrations, which is a totally fair observation. These sort of tools are what is going to be the future and what is coming. So we need to think of ways to operate around it rather than saying we're just going to discount it. There's two reasons for that. We can see here it reduces our CPC, so therefore we're able to get more conversions. And the other is that this is where the world is going, and I'll touch on privacy and all the rest of it. We aren't going to be able to do anything else in the future. So we need to come up with ways of adapting, whether that's making it harder to get through to that conversion, that registration. So how do we qualify them through the registration process? How can we pre-qualify with creative to make sure that we're getting the most relevant clicks? These sort of things are the levers that we're going to be pulling in the future, or what should be pulling now. Next, on to Meta. So Meta's seen a similar sort of trend. Here I pulled the data for 23 through to 2025. And as you can see, it fluctuates. We get natural fluctuations through the year. So for example, those that have ever worked in sort of retail will know Q4 around Black Friday is crazy time. And it's reflected in the auction as well. Auction costs spike very significantly over Black Friday, and you can near enough correlate every single one of these spikes that I'm showing here to a typical sales period. You'll typically see cheaper auction time around sort of January time, where everyone's sort of chilling out and doing less of that sort of stuff. Yeah, we've got a low of 8.23 and then high of £11.12. When I do an average based on those, so sort of leveling out those spikes, is 7.34%. The other thing to call out here is that dip. So it's dipped back down to $8.07 on average. Now, what happened here is that Meta enforced you would default into Advantage Plus. Advantage Plus is a similar tool to PMax in that it uses algorithmic-based targeting to find people most likely to convert, so as in fire that conversion off on your website. It has the same drawbacks in that quality can sometimes be a little bit more ropey, but again, it's the future. It's being now forced on us. We have to come up with ways to navigate around that rather than trying to force our way out of it and away from it. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is LinkedIn. So it's 221% more expensive to advertise on LinkedIn than average. So average being other social platforms. That's a pretty outstanding stat that's a little bit scary to read. And it's because LinkedIn has a key USP that's different to the others. So I've talked a lot about PMax, Advantage Plus, and all these algorithmic-based targeting things. LinkedIn has an advantage in that it is a holder of tons of first-party data. When I sort of speak to people at events and things like that, the number one way that I do that sort of illustrate this point is I will ask a survey of the room and say, who has an accurate job title on Facebook? And you might get a smattering of hands. Then we say Instagram, and hopefully should get no hands because it's impossible to put your job title on Instagram. But on LinkedIn, near enough the whole room will say that my job title is correct. And that is really powerful, and LinkedIn know it. So the CPMs on LinkedIn are a lot more expensive, but we can be a lot more specific. And the best way to lean into that and use that to our advantage is if we're going after it as a conversion driving campaign, we already know it's going to get less impressions because it's more expensive. And as we say, if you get less impressions, you're less likely to get conversions. It's not going to look like a success at all. We're not going to drive that core CPA KPI, that KPI of getting the most conversions possible. But that's not to say it's not relevant to your marketing mix. It should be used as an awareness driver. So we're saying we're going after this very specific segment, whether it's like senior leaders within the community that your event's part of. We go after those senior leaders and we look at how we're engaging them. We can use InMail and other really highly engaging formats. And then we can look at uplift against other segments and see how that campaign actually impacted it. And you'll hear more conversations about sort of incrementality and other things more and more over the next year, 2 years. That's going to be the sort of future of measurement in paid media generally. So I thought I'd wrap up with just a simple, why should brands care? The first is the obvious. Rising costs will ultimately hit your marketing budgets with more budget needed for the same equivalent conversion volume. It's just the core point that I'm trying to get at is if you're spending the same amount year over year over year and the auction costs are increasing, it's impossible for you to hit the same result. Yes, we can include tools like PMax, but as more advertisers get involved on PMax, we're starting to see the benefit of that level out because it's the norm. It's what everyone else is doing. So you're just not going to see the same benefit. You have to consider that when you're briefing in and deciding how much, where to allocate your budget. Next is that algorithmic based targeting. It has its drawbacks, as I've said, but it's here to stay. If we can understand the impact on our measurement plan, so saying, okay, the quality of these reg is likely to be a little bit lower. So how does that impact our wider measurement plan? How can we impact the quality through our registration process, through our creative? Those are the key factors to be considering. And then finally, good creative is more important than ever. And video is just essential. It's kind of a non-negotiable at this point that video should be a part of your campaigns. We've been saying it for the last 3 years and we'll continue to say it for the next 10. video is essential in your campaigns, and really thinking about your creative as a whole and how that engages your audience is more important than ever in this world of algorithmic-based targeting and rising costs. You just have to have it in as part of the conversation. Okay, so that's us. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop me an email, and see you next time.